Thanks for tuning into this episode of Walden Wong Art, and today we're going to be doing an art review and critique video over one of my patrons. His name is Michael. He did one of my assignments that are located on my Patreon page. For those of you who landed on my channel and you don't know who I am, my name is Walden Wong. I'm a comic book artist for Marvel and DC Comics. You can see more of my work over on my website is waldenwongart.com. Over there, there's a lot of links to all my social media, as well as a shop page where you can buy original art and prints and so forth. And if you're interested in being one of my patrons, my Patreon is patreon.com/WaldenWongArt, where aspiring artists such as Michael here, he would send me a piece of artwork that he worked on, and I would do a full review, and I would do markups and make his videos for him to watch, as well as people on YouTube to also learn from. But learning as an artist, when I'm reviewing your work, you would learn more from it, so that will help a lot. Not a lot of professional artists who make art review and critique videos such as this one. So without further ado, here we go. Okay, so this is Michael's artwork over here, and we're gonna take a look at the pencils first. This one's this artwork here was penciled by Mike Walden, and we're gonna take a look here. Okay, so we have Spider-Man, Rhino. Some of you may recognize this from some of my previous videos from other patrons who has done this art assignment on my Patreon. And I'm gonna look at the pencils. For those of you who haven't seen this before, here's the pencils, very nice work. And here's Michael's inks over it. Okay, Michael took a photo of the original artwork, and we're gonna review this now, okay? So I'm gonna toggle back and forth to look at the pencils and the inks, and then there's a few things I see right away. I'm gonna go here and use red color so we can see the difference, okay? I'm gonna grab my pen here, and I'm gonna adjust some of the lines and make sure I have the correct line, because I'm gonna be talking about temporal lines. That's one of the first things that I see here. Now, when we look at this area, we'll notice that there's a lot of hatching and cross hatching, and then just a lot of lines that's kind of a little bit off. When we look at the pencils, they're very clean. They're very nice and smooth. So what penciler Michael Walden wanted here was taper lines. So in order to do taper lines, what I would usually do is I would start thin line and I would push into it. So again, start thin line and push into it, thin, push into it, thin, and then push into it, okay? Obviously, when you go smaller, you should see the sharper tip. So go thin, press into it, thin, and then press into it. That should have been this area, okay? There's also other areas, such as Rhino's nose. We're gonna take a look at the pencil, this area right over here. See these lines? Sometimes the penciler, they'll just indicate lines, and then they want you as an inker to go in there and close up those lines. So to do that, again, I'll start thin, and I'll push into it. Start thin, push into it, start thin, push into it. You want these lines to look like little small triangles. So I'm gonna draw a few of those lines right over here. Okay, so what you want is go thin, press into it, go thin, press into it. As you're drawing that line, you want it to get thicker as you're closing it. This way, the tips over here starts in the right place, and then the little tips on this area, right over here, they kind of end in a nice place. You don't want those lines to be too thick in some areas and too thin in another area. Okay, we're gonna take a look at this over here. Okay, you see how Mike, when he penciled this, it's nice and like orderly. Like for example, this area there's a pattern going on over here. But when it's ink, there's lines that's going in a different place. So I'm gonna go over here and show you on the pencils on how I will approach inking this. So right here, I would just go and ink. Let me go here and just go right here, just go on top and then close up those lines very, very neatly, like that. Okay, and it's okay to go in there and kind of add a few more lines just to fill it in, and then clean that up. Okay, that way this area has a nice pattern, and then this area also has a nice pattern. So that's something that you need to work on. Okay, I'm going to select this, Control C. I'm going to go over here and then put it back over here. Okay. Okay, we're going to take a look at some of the other areas that can be improved upon. Okay, so the panel borders, try this. Okay, so when I'm making panel borders, usually I'll use the repeatograph size 8 to give it a nice consistent thick line. And when I'm making, I also like to keep the work inside the panel border. So what I don't want is, let me go here. Let me mesh this together first, merge layers. What I don't want is lines to be outside of the panel. So you want to keep that a little bit neater. Okay, so here. So you can always go and use whiteout and clean that up a little bit, because when a comic book page is printed, no one's going to see that those lines here. So make sure those lines are nicely inside. When you're inking lines here, you can also make sure those are not going outside of the panel border. Keep everything inside the panel border. Okay, sometimes it's easier for me to stick a post-it note like right over here. Imagine there's a post-it note here and another post-it note here, and then I can just go here and draw lines, and after I'm done drawing lines, I would just remove the post-it note. That way I'll keep all my lines on the inside. So that's another tip for all of you aspiring artists out there. Now I'm going to take a look at line weights. There's some of the areas, we're going to take a look at the pencils. So the pencil, you see how smooth these lines are over here? Okay, when it comes to inking, you want those lines to be smooth. You don't want double lines that doesn't belong there. See this extra line here? Just erase that. Make sure that's not there. Okay, I'm gonna look at the Spider-Man here. Okay, see these nice clean lines? I'm gonna talk about line weights for a second here. Okay, so line weights is when you're drawing a line and then the line goes from thick to thin to thick to thin. It bounces around. That line doesn't always have to be like a consistent straight line. You can draw a partial line and then break it up and then draw like another line following that. Okay, over here there's still a lot of lines that's coming outside of. Try to keep your lines inside, okay, Michael? That's one thing to make sure of. You know, as an inker myself and as an artist who's been looking at comic book work a lot, I can tell when a line is kind of like a little bit off and then looks like a little bit kind of like going out. Right here, you see this line? You should complete the line over here. Every line is important. When we were younger, we're taught to draw, and then when we're drawing, we're thinking, okay, we just need to draw the most important part. If you're an inker for a comic book publisher, you want to be as detailed as you can. Every line you put down is important, so keep that in mind, okay? So here, I'm inking Spider-Man's side. I'll go thick, and then I'll go thin, and then this part I'll go thin, and then right here I'll go thick, and then right here I go thin, okay? Like that. So the more you bounce your line weights around, the more depth that it looks. Another thing you need to focus on and concentrate on is to think about objects that are closer to the viewer to objects that are further back. Foreground, middle ground, and background. You always have to remember that. So foreground objects are usually thicker. So Spider-Man's leg over here, what I would want you to do is make this leg a little bit thicker. Okay, so I'm bouncing the line weight, and I'm also thinking about where the shadows would be, and I'll make those lines a little bit thicker. Okay, so right here, thicker, and then thicker here. Okay, same way over here, like that. Okay, so make this thicker, thin, thicker, thin, and thicker. When you do that, the whole Spider-Man's leg just pops more forward in the background. Now this here is a little bit way too thick. So originally, Mike Bolden, he drew Spider-Man's back over here like a thin line, and you went in there and made it way too thick. So I wouldn't have it that thick. So a good line weight would be maybe like that. Okay, so don't go way too thick. Okay. Now the hatch lines, these are okay. Let me talk about hatch lines. When you're drawing hatch lines, you want your, I'm going to call this tic-tac-toe lines. Okay, you want those tic-tac-toe lines to be consistently spaced apart. Okay, so that way the little boxes that you have in between, they're almost the same size. What we don't want is to have like a narrow rectangle that's over here, and all of a sudden this rectangle is bigger, this one's smaller, this one's like wider. You want to keep those all consistent. Okay, I'm gonna go here and show you how I do this. So I will go ink a line. Let me make this my pen thicker. The ink a line, and I space them. All I'm focusing on is the spacing from one line to another. Okay, I don't look at the cross hatching yet. I just look at the initial hatch. After I have that, then I would rotate the paper around to whichever angle, and then I would cross hatch. And then as I'm doing this, I also think about the spacing in between each line. So I'll draw a line and then draw another line. Sometimes a pencil will draw all those lines for you. Don't always try to trace over the penciler's line. What you want is to have all these little squares to be consistent. So I'm going to show, see all these squares? Each box is fairly close to one shape over another. You can establish a pattern, so it goes from smaller to thicker, but not having it run all over the place where some is thick and some is small. Okay. Again, here's some lines that you didn't complete. These lines, make sure it comes out from back there. Okay. Some of these lines over here, I don't know if you're using a brush or using a quill. Try to be a little bit smoother. You see some of these lines here, they're kind of shaky. There's a bump that goes here like that. When you're inking a line, try to just go really quickly. The quicker you draw the line, the smoother you're gonna get that line, okay? The slower you draw the line, more chances of it being wobbly. So just ink that line quicker. Focus on where you're starting the line and where you're ending the line, and just draw that line really quickly, okay? It's kind of like you're throwing something across the park, and then you're throwing it really quickly, you're gonna get a smooth parabola line like that, okay? Okay, we're gonna take a look at here. So this area, let's take a look at the pencils. See the pencils, because you see how Mike Walden is trying to go in here and close up these lines. So what you wanna do is go in there and close up the lines. These lines, you see that this looks like a little rectangle here. Here, you wanna close up this line like this, okay? So close that up, close this up, close these up. If you can't do that with a brush with the first go, it's always okay to just go in here and kind of go back in there and clean it up a little bit, and then make those little triangles like what I'm doing over here. That's always okay, okay? It's easier to accomplish this task with a brush than with a quill, okay? These speed lines, again, make it really neat. What I like to do is I like to rotate to where my hand can draw the line a little bit better, and then follow that arc. I'm gonna go here, and then I'm gonna ink these lines. Okay, I'm gonna go here, make sure my hand goes that direction. I'll ink that line, and then I'll start inking lines where it's thin, and then thick, and then thin. So I go thin, thick, thin, thin, thick, thin. Okay, that gives it more of a speed line. Usually, I just do that like really quickly. Okay, so follow that line here: thin, thick, thin, thin, thick, thin, thin, thick, thin. Okay. Okay, we're going to take a look at any other areas. Let's take a look at Michael's inks again. Okay, so right away, background, some artists will think that it's not important. When I'm making characters, I always think about language and such. And when I'm thinking about characters, I'm also thinking about foreground, middle ground, background. When I'm making backgrounds, like objects, buildings in the back and stuff, I also think about foreground, middle ground, background, okay? So that said, some of these lines that's closer to the viewer, these lines right over here, I would make these lines a little bit thicker, and as I go towards the back, I'll make it thinner. This will create depth. Okay, these horizontal lines that goes this way, I would want to make this one a little bit thicker here, and as I go here, I would make this thicker here. So what you're creating is, I'm going to show you, I'm going to find a white area to draw it. What you're creating is depth within just a few lines. So I'm going to go here, draw that line, here, draw that line, draw this line, let me draw that line again, here, go like that. You see how it's thicker towards the top? And then when I ink this line here, one line, I'll go thicker, and as I go further back, it goes thinner, and then thinner, and then thinner, okay? This creates depth into flat lines, okay? This creates a 3D image, okay? So let's take a look. Yeah, so I would recommend going from working on your taper lines. Again, I'm gonna give you another example just so we can practice some more together. Okay, look at these lines. Might just draw lines and there's a blunt space. What I like you to do is practice working on tapering those lines. Start thin, press down, start thin, press down. If Mike has however many, like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, however many, don't concentrate on how many lines and just tracing these lines. Just focus on closing up these lines. When you close these lines, you want them to close nicely, roughly in the same place. If it doesn't close roughly nicely in the same place, just go back in there and then kind of build up on top of it and then close it. You also want that pattern to start in the same area and end in the same area. So that's one thing that you need to focus on, okay? The next thing is to focus on line weights. Line weights is the thick to thins. Okay, so for example, let's find an area that I can show you. Oh, you forgot to ink Spider-Man's webbing over here. Line weights, I'm gonna look at, say, this area right here. Okay, this area right here. Okay, so when I'm making this part, I'll go thicker here, and then here I go middle ground, and then I go thinner, like that, just to create depth. This part is okay, where it's thicker. The Spider-Man's head is way too thick. Way too thick. You don't want to like change the penciler's work that much, okay? You don't want to make it too thick. And then next thing I want you to work on is make sure lines doesn't go out of the panel border. If you have panels, make sure you don't like draw the extra lines over there. Those doesn't belong there, okay? Like for example here, if you make a mistake, use whiteout and just clean it up a little bit. Over here, don't ink that part. The more you practice, okay, so when I'm doing comic book, I don't know if you're inking the characters first and then going back in there and then inking the panels. When I'm doing comic book inking, usually I'll ink all the panel borders first. Once I have the panel borders, then I'll start inking all the characters and backgrounds and such. And that way I know when to stop. Okay. Next thing I need you to do is if there are areas of artwork that you didn't finish, I want you to go back in there and just double check and look at your lines. Okay. Make sure all the lines are not that you didn't miss any lines, like such as Spider-Man's fingers, like at first, like this area here, or lines like that, like right here. You forgot to like ink that line over here. Too much lines over here, so focus on that. Take your time on looking over your artwork. I've been in comic books for a fairly good amount of time now. When I look at artwork, I can tell what areas are missing and what areas are like not inked or over inked. So that's something to keep track of, okay? Directional speed lines is also something that's important. Now, we're gonna take a look at these speed lines. You see these speed lines going this direction, all of a sudden this one's going this direction and this one's going this direction. They're not going towards the same direction. When we look at the pencils, you notice that it's all going towards the same direction. So when you're inking that, you do want to have your lines to go the same direction. So we're gonna go in here, look at the pencils. Okay, the pencils goes from, we're gonna go right over here. Let's see, cancel this, go back here. Okay, we're gonna ink a line this direction, this line goes this direction, this line, so you see how it's going the same direction? Okay, now when we take that, all those lines, let's see, control done. We're gonna select this line here, Control C. We're gonna take a look at the pencils, and then we're gonna take a look at that. You see how the ink lines that you're drawing is going different directions? I know sometimes when you're inking and you're going one direction and you just feel like you're gonna go with the flow, you still need to look at the pencils and make sure that it's going the correct direction, okay? So focus on those few areas. This Rhino here, there's a lot of extra lines in here. So I would go and taper these lines over here. Taper those lines cleanly. Let's see, this is supposed to be all black here. So we're gonna make this all dark here. Taper these lines, little triangles over here. Okay, taper a little bit neatly, make sure, because over here it's kind of, all the other areas looks okay, but like Rhino here, there's a lot going on. When we look at the pencils, this is a solid black area. They're not hash lines. I know sometimes, especially for myself, when I was new to inking and I started inking, I started doing a lot of stuff that I thought I was being creative, but then it would just be kind of like hard to see what's going on, like things wasn't clear. So these hatch lines over here on the forehead of the Rhino, we do want those lines to be closing up like this, and then all this back here is supposed to be black. So all this is, let's see the pencils, let's take a look at the pencils. Okay, so all this area is supposed to be a solid black, all this area is a solid black. Okay, these areas closes up. These are taper lines that closes up. So you don't want lines that are just floating there. So Michael, good job on this. so far, you just need to practice those few points that I talked about. If you have any questions, comment down below and I'll respond to all your comments. Again, for those of you who are watching this and don't know who I am, my name is Walden Wong. I'm a comic book artist from Marvel DC. Check out my website, waldenwongart.com. And if you also want me to be one of your patrons where I can do an art review and critique over your artwork, it could be assignments that you've done over on my Patreon, or it can be artwork that you have that you want me to look at. Hit me up over on my Patreon page. It's patreon.com/WaldenWongArt. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't subscribed to my channel yet already, please subscribe, hit like and share this video. Until next time, keep on drawing, keep on practicing. The more detailed you are with the inking, the better your work will be. And after a while of inking, it does get easier. So thank you again and take care. Bye-bye.